right, welcome to a special edition of Citizens United. I'm John, your host. Robin's over here in the background. We're having it's a special episode because it's kicking off what's going to be a Wednesday podcast that I know all of you out there are going to enjoy because it's something that you guys I know out there want to talk about. And generally on Citizens United on Monday, we're doing like more local stuff and all that. But this is going to be very exciting. And I got to bring him in. You guys know if you watch the show who he is, but for some of you out there, you wouldn't. We're going to introduce you to our good friend, Dennis Hannon. Hey, Dennis.
Hey, how are you? Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Oh, no, thank you for being here. We're going to start doing this every Wednesday night, right? At 6:00.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. Now, I appreciate the opportunity. I know that you guys focus a lot on the local politics, Niagara Falls, Erie, Niagara County. So I'm excited to bring a little bit of the national and geopolitics into this because I think that it affects every American family as a whole, even just within New York State and beyond.
Yeah, no doubt. No, we need this. We need this kind of talk. And because you know what? We were talking before the show, the media, you know what I mean? We need to do this because if you're watching, I don't care which one it is. It can go from Al Jazeera all the way down to One America or Newsmax, whatever. They all have their own thing, their own spin on the deal. We need you to help us figure it out, maybe in a way that isn't so political, if it's possible. But of course, we do know who's doing what. I mean, that's part of it. But Dennis, I'm not going to talk too much. I want to ask you, though, to just introduce yourself to everybody. I know the people that watch us know your ties. You had some FBI stuff. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Dennis Emery Hannon. I'm born and raised Buffalo, New York. I've held various roles in senior engineering from software systems, networking, engineering. I'm a former vice president for a major national bank. I worked about 10 to 12 years in banking, career in finance, or business and finance rather. And then in my spare time, I was a consultant with the FBI out of the Buffalo field office here, and I consulted them on human trafficking, and I specialized in children that were victims of violent crimes. So that's, I did deep undercover work for them. It was all under an alias that I was given. All of the paperwork that I signed was all under that fictitious name. A lot of the times I was spent holed up in hotel rooms with agents and we were doing sting operations. So that was really what I specialized in. And it was really because I had a unique skill set that they could leverage and utilize, where they didn't really have the skills and the resources. And we see that a lot now where a lot of the heavy lifting is done by consultants like myself.
Yeah, no, we're so happy to have you. I remember when me and Noel, somehow I can't even remember how we all came together, but it was like a blessing because now we have somebody who's done it, and we want to do that on that show on Mondays. So you're just an incredible, resource for us, and just very smart and brilliant and all that. So now though, we got your show. We're gonna do this podcast on Wednesdays at 6:00. You see the canon. We joked about Hannon's canon. I remember the one night, so we just did that. It may change. Who knows what we'll call this thing? But for now, it's a canon. And tonight we're going to talk. And I encourage everybody in the message board. Jerry's here. I see a bunch of people here. Chime in, please. We're talking border security tonight, right?
Yeah, border security. And to the audience listening, I ask that you stay engaged. If you have questions, ask away. Really what this is about is this is about dialogue, right? This is where even if we have somebody that's in disagreement, hey, let's talk this over. Maybe if you strongly disagree with the views, or even if you want to challenge some of the things that were stated as facts, it's your chance to do so. We'll have you come on the next show, and if I'm wrong, I'll right the wrong. I have no problem doing that because really that's how we grow. That's how we learn. I am not going to get everything right. I don't intend to. But what I can promise is that I'm going to do my best to deliver unbiased facts. You will get my opinions too, because that's free. But we're going to have fun with it. These are issues, hot button issues that affect every single American family and future generations to come. And the moment that we lose our ability to have open and honest dialogue with one another, and we lose our our right to free speech is when we lose our right to everything else, because without that First Amendment, all of the other amendments fall.
Yeah, and we welcome. I know on any show here, we welcome the anyone. Just come on. You want to talk? You don't like what you don't like what you hear, or if you just whatever. We are welcome to that because there's no real argument. It's your, like you said, it's your opinion. We can go back and forth and have a debate that's adult. So let me give you a few things here. First on the message board, real quick. Burdette is congratulating you on the new show. Jerry says this: there is no border security. In fact, there is no more border, averaging over 12,000 a day. Now broke every record. So there you go.
Yeah, and actually, I think the other day was a record. In Arizona, I believe they had 14,000 illegal border crossers. 14,000, folks. That is a lot of people.
Yeah,
That's a ton.
that's almost Niagara Falls has 46,000. So think of that.
And just to put that into perspective, so let's call it what it is. These are illegal immigrants that are crossing our border. And what they're doing is they're claiming to seek asylum. Okay. Most of them can't even speak English. And the way that they're seeking asylum is because they have a pre-written script that's given to them by the coyotes that are smuggling them over, which usually fees start at about $25,000 per group. That's usually how much it costs for the cartel to smuggle you over. And each one of these people, if you see the illegal border crossers on some of the news and the live streams, you'll notice they all have colored wristbands on. And those colored wristbands actually denote how much they paid those cartels to smuggle them over. Now, the different colors mean the different amounts. So when it comes to crossing over a river, like the Rio Grande or something like that, they prioritize the people with certain colored wristbands over the others because they paid the most. It's all about money. There's a price. This is a multi-billion-dollar human smuggling, human trafficking, child trafficking, drug trafficking operation that not only the United States is complicit in, but that we're encouraging. And we're doing that through NGOs. So these people they're getting a script when they come over. And it basically just says, I am seeking asylum in the United States. And it has some more information. It has some things about their rights and what Border Patrol can and can't do. They can't speak any English. They're just handing the paper over. So you have to ask yourself, well, why are they being called asylum seekers? If you notice that in the media, it's always asylum seekers. Mm-hmm. It's never immigrants. And the reason why they're called asylum seekers is because when you claim to seek asylum, you are not subject to the same kind of requirements that somebody seeking a legitimate citizenship in the United States would have to go through, actual legal immigration. It allows them to circumvent legal immigration policies and controls that are in place. So we have, and guys, we are not doing this show because we're against people immigrating, right, to the United States. The United States has long been a melting pot for different cultures, different ideas, different people from different religions and backgrounds and races. That's great, but there is a legal path to citizenship for a reason, and it's not it's nothing that is out of the. We're not asking for blood here, so what are the requirements to be a legal immigrant in the United States? Well, usually you have to be a minimum age. It's usually 18 years old. You have to continuously and physically live in the United States, whether it be on, it could be an H-1B work visa. You have to establish residency in a district that allows it, typically, and that's through the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And when you apply, you have to be deemed as a person of good moral character. Those are the requirements to become a legal U.S. citizen here for naturalization. Now, when you're seeking asylum, you don't have to do any of that.
Right.
You're literally just crossing right over, handing them a paper. And what's happening is the government is sponsoring this. Now, the government isn't doing this directly. They're doing this through NGOs, they're called. And an NGO, for those that aren't aware, it is a non-governmental organization. So you have a whole ton of nonprofits, charities that are getting grants from the government, and the government tells them what they have to do for this money. And the NGOs take that money and they do what the government tells them to do. And they're the ones that are facilitating this invasion on our southern U.S. border. When these people are coming over seeking asylum, they're not only given their script, right, but they're getting a cell phone. And the cell phone actually has a GPS app with coordinates for different drop points along their route. It has their route already mapped out on this phone. It has different water drops, things of that nature, different resources that they'll need, information that they'll need when they get there. They're given $5,000 cash off the bat. You'll notice that a lot of the times these illegals will actually just drop their money, their Mexican money, because they don't need it. They have no intention on converting their Mexican dollars into US dollars because they already have $5,000 cash in their pocket. So not only are we allowing it to happen, but we're incentivizing it. We're helping it. And, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask. Let me ask you this. Maybe this is a question that's too soon, but what to every country in the world? I don't care how liberal it is, really, in my mind, in Europe and they all have rules. They do. Australia, everybody. They're not just letting people. They just don't let them do this.
No, not at all.
Why? Why would you say? I mean, maybe it's your opinion, or why are we allowing? Why would we do this?
So we will get to that. I want to hold off on that, but to your point, you are absolutely correct. This isn't happening in other countries. You take Poland, for example. Poland has never suffered from a major terrorist attack. Why? Because they have a big ass double fenced wall with barbed wire surrounding it with the border of Belarus. That's why. And they have very strict immigration laws there. Any kind of illegal border crossers, anything like that, they are met with force. And they set an example to the others so that they know, don't come here. You're not welcome. We have proper channels for legal citizenship and proper channels for a reason. If you want to come over here, you have to do X, Y, Z, and we need to vet you because we care about our citizens. That's what this is about. And that's why you don't see that. And for your audience out there, I have a lot of friends on both sides of the aisle for this issue. I know a lot of liberals and a lot of conservatives, or even some of the establishment Republicans that are in the mix. And their argument for this is always the same: that, well, America's a melting pot, and we should embrace the cultural differences, and we should do this and that. Not if it affects our sovereignty. A nation without borders doesn't have any sovereignty. When it affects the safety of our citizens, that's when I have a serious issue with this.
In your mind, have you noticed? Now, I'm not talking political. I guess this is hard to even figure out because I guess it would be polling. But have you noticed that people, are changing the way they think about it? Like I'm saying, I know that. I know how Democrats are. I know what Republicans think. I know all that, but doesn't it feel like there's a change, or no?
There is a change because people are waking up to it. And I think a lot of it is over the course of history. We saw what was done with COVID, right? It was safe and effective. It was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. You don't want to kill your grandma Millie. You better get the vaccine. And now we know that vaccinated deaths, account for more of the population than the unvaccinated. We know that it doesn't prevent transmissibility or the rate of infection. We know that just isn't the case. And I think that people are waking up to this. They saw what happened in COVID. They saw that, hey, look, you couldn't congregate in a religious assembly. You couldn't go and get the medication that you needed. However, you could burn down cities in Portland, Oregon, if you were a part of Antifa or the BLM riots. And I'm calling them riots because that's what they were. So I think it's a combination of bullshit over time, and people are starting to wake up and finally see it. We also know that we have a fentanyl crisis. Look, like I said, I got friends on both sides of the aisle here. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. You cannot advocate open borders and condemn child trafficking and fentanyl in the United States. You can't. Here's why, guys, because 98.9% of the fentanyl in the United States comes through the southern border.
Right.
That's where it's all coming from. And so what do? We sympathize, right? Sympathize.
Right.
It's a weakness to sympathize with the devil, because that's exactly what this is. Instead of attacking the root cause of the problem, right, we put safe injection sites up. We put Narcan dispensers everywhere. And I have a lot of friends that I love dearly that are all for the Narcan dispensers. And I'm like, that is not solving anything. That what that is that's a band-aid. If you want to tackle the fentanyl crisis in America, you will close the southern border, because that's where 98.9% of the fentanyl is coming in from. And you have to ask yourself, what is fentanyl? It's a great question. Fentanyl is a biological weapon. That's all it is. It's created in China by our friend over there, President Xi Jinping. Okay. And it's a biological weapon. It kills. Okay. The amount that you put just enough on the head of an eraser is enough to kill you. This stuff isn't getting cooked in an RV by two guys in the desert. This is being manufactured, pharmaceutical grade stuff that's being made in China, distributed through drug cartels, and carried across our open borders on people with these wristbands. They're not only asylum seekers, but they're also drug mules for the cartel. Okay, so you have to look at this from a bigger picture, and I think that's where people are starting to do now. They're starting to wake up. They're starting to see the impact around them on their communities, and they realize that, look, we cannot continue to keep doing the same thing.
Let me jump in the message board, because there's a couple of things that I think people want to ask you. First off, Cassidy says, I'm curious how you feel about asylum seekers who come over legally, like initially enter legally through an airport with some type of visa and then try to seek asylum from there.
Yeah, so if they come over legal, well, I mean, if you think about it, it's all legal, right? With the way that they're doing it, because we're not arresting them. There's no punishment. I think that coming over here on an H-1B visa is entirely different. Okay, I've worked with a lot of people that are here on H-1B visas, and that gives you the right to come over here to work. And you're vetted, you have a sponsor, and you actually already have a job lined up. So if you're coming over here on an H-1B visa, really, you can seek asylum, but chances are you're going to be seeking more of a legal immigration status as opposed to asylum seekers. Now, that's not to say to the person who asked that question that maybe there are some legitimate asylum seekers. Okay, maybe they are, but the fact of the matter is none of these people are being vetted.
Right. And now one more thing. One thing I want to ask you too, Burdett has been saying some stuff in the message board that I haven't been able to get to, and I don't want him to think I'm for not seeing it. He talks about open borders, and he feels that's the wrong word to use. He does say in here, let me go back a little bit for you there, for a second, where yes, he said, yes, but we have guards and a closed border. What are your thoughts on what I'm not sure what he's trying, Burdett, if you can elaborate a little more. He says words matter also. Every word has a meaning. Now, when one says our border is open, it is not. We have checkpoints and security, but not enough. Saying it's open is saying there are no guards, security, or checkpoints.
You're right. No, there are no guards, Burdett. These checkpoints are pickup locations that are on the GPS coordinates for these open parts of our border, and I have some media which I'll show that in a second. These open points in our border are actually pickup spots. Our border patrol and these agents out there, they are actually taxi cab drivers, because guess what happens with these sanctuary cities? The border patrol on their script, it actually has the city that the person would like to go to. So everybody makes their way, they follow the route, they go to this checkpoint that's an open spot in the border wall, and they wait there for border patrol to pick them up. They give them the script, border patrol can't do anything, and they drop them off at the airport, and they end up on their way to one of these sanctuary cities. So these aren't guards. Okay. And there's a lot of people that are covering this on the front lines. Ben Berquam out of Real America's Voice is doing a terrific job. There's also another gentleman, which will share some of his media and some of his experience. He's on the front line. He's with the Associated Press. And he details this. And for those of you out there, your audience, I highly recommend look up Jonathan Townsend Alexander on Facebook, because he does a lot of live streams and they cover this stuff where these Border Patrol agents are actually just taxi cab drivers that are taking them to their next spot. But you know what? Let's actually get into that. Okay, so there's this comment here. You can keep that back up.
That's just Jerry saying about border guards that they are being overrun. They've been saying it for 3 years. And, he says 3 years now, and they're all saying we have no borders. Yes, they do have some people, but not nearly enough. Approximately 8 million have gotten in here illegally.
Yeah. Yes, there's even more than that. We'll run through the numbers in a second. So this is what we're talking about here. Let me share this screen. I'm going to move this over. I'm doing all this at once, so I appreciate everybody's patience here.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. We're good.
And Jerry makes another good point while you're doing that, that 300 Americans a day die from fentanyl, and that it's also leading to sex trafficking,
right?
Especially with young children.
We're going to cover that too. There's a tree that they call the panty tree.
Yes.
And we're going to look at that. So here's an example of a checkpoint that's our in our border wall, right? The gates are wide open. Now you think, well, maybe they were just left open by accident. Nobody would willingly, there's no bad intent here. No, they're actually, what's happening is they are, let me go through this. Sorry, I need the right media here. They are actually being welded open. So these open checkpoints, they're noticing that the gates are welded open, so you actually can't shut them. And this is done by the NGOs. They have people that go in and they'll weld the gates open, right? So this is an example of the gate in Arizona, and it's on the backside on the bottom part of this wall. And this is everywhere. Okay. Now what you do is you look at, and this is an example of the checkpoint where you can't see it, but over to the left over here, there's actually an opening. And these are the kind of GPS coordinates, or these pickup locations or checkpoints, you could call them that, but these are really just pickups. This is where Border Patrol Uber agents take them to their next stop once they're across the border. Now, what you see here is interesting, okay? You have some folded blankets here because they're preparing for the next round of migrants. But what are these blankets when you zoom in on these? These are all Red Cross blankets. Every single one of them. When you look at the videos of these illegals that are over here and they're waiting in lines, they all have like those NASA, those like foil looking blankets. They're all getting, all these NGOs are all getting it from the same from the same people. It's, and then they leave their garbage behind and this and that. But this is what it looks like. So just, 1 week in review from Jonathan Alexander, who's on the front lines, 11,000 apprehensions, 500 rescues, because this is a dangerous trek. 100 federal criminal cases, 15 human smuggling events, 6 narcotics events. Check out Live Border News for more of that. He's got videos. You can do the ride-alongs with him. It is wild. And here our friends, some fellow nerds, did some geofencing data. And this is actually the migration paths of illegal border crossers, because they're given cell phones. So they're given cell phones. Some nerds out there were able to use geofencing techniques and actually track them and where they're going and their journey and everything else, right? So, for example, here are some water drop-offs at these locations by an NGO. A lot of these water bottles, they'll say "Good luck, friends" on them, and they'll have water. So they're welding the gates open. They're dropping off water. They're helping these people invade our country, and it is absolutely wild to think that. And So let's get into the actual statistics of this, right? So border encounters with, this breaks it down by family unit, unaccompanied children, and single adults. The majority of illegal border crossers that are coming in here are military fighting age men. They have no allegiance to America. They don't. They don't plan on learning the language. They don't plan on embracing the culture. And quite often, I have a friend who actually works the southern border. And quite often, what's happening is they're coming over here, they're getting the benefits, they're sending it back home, and then they come across the border and they do it all over again. It's a vicious cycle. It's insane. But you have to ask yourself, these unaccompanied children, right? That means that these kids are coming across the border, okay, and they don't have any adult with them. They're coming over alone. It's wild. It's mind blowing. Yeah. Right. But not only that, and there's some other facts. There's been nearly 770,000 gotaways, including the 400 million illegal border crossers spotted just in the fiscal year 2023 alone. It's insane. That's just since President Joe Biden took office. There's been 10 million. These are the highest levels of illegal border crossers ever recorded in U.S. history. So by contrast, there were 308,000 known reported gotaways in fiscal 2021, 606,000 reported in 2022. Just in fiscal year 2023 alone, there are 736 known suspected terrorists that were apprehended at our southern borders, according to the Customs and Border Protection data. 736 known suspected terrorists. Guys, that's what we know about. That isn't those aren't the gotaways. Those are the ones, those are the ones that we know are here. So imagine how many others are here that we don't know about. It only took 19 people to execute the September 11th attacks. And we have 700, and that's just this year, 736 known suspected terrorists. They suspect, according to the Customs and Border Patrol data, that the majority of the gotaways are actually single military age men, just like the single adults that are coming through. But a lot of the times they're smuggling in women and children as well. Just to get an idea of that, I mean, if we go back to this chart up here, 144,834 unaccompanied children. That's just in 2021. We don't have all the data yet for 2022 and 2023. It's still out there. I've seen a lot of mixed, but it's up there. It's quite a bit. So you have to ask yourself, well, what happens to these unaccompanied minors when they come over here, right? What happens to them? Well, that's a great question, because there's a director out of the Office of Refugee and Resettlement, ORR. Her name is Robert Dunn Marcos. And I lifted this from her site. She is responsible. She serves the Office of Refugee Resettlement and the Administration of Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Her current role, she oversees ORR's Unaccompanied Children Program and Refugee Replacement Programs. The Unaccompanied Children Programs provides the care and custodies of unaccompanied children referred to ORR's care until they're released to a vetted sponsor. The refugee programs promote long-term sufficiency, integration, and well-being for refugees and other populations eligible for ORR benefits and services. So the person that's responsible for taking care of these children that are unaccompanied coming across the border is Robin Dunn. I'd like to introduce to your audience a Senate grilling by Senator Hawley, where he questions Robin Dunn Marcos on what happens to these children and how they're placed across the border. Let's roll that right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Marcos, can I just start with you? You testified a moment ago to Senator Butler that every child gets a Know Your Rights presentation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is that before or after you release them to labor traffickers?
Senator, every child that comes into our care gets a Know Your Rights presentation, as well as...
Have you read these New York Times reports? These stories, the series of stories the New York Times has done on the children who are in your care, have you read them?
Yes, I have.
Have you read that children are scrubbing dishes? They are operating heavy machinery. They are delivering meals. They are harvesting coffee. They are working construction. They are working as housekeepers. They are working overnight shifts at plants where they are not paid. They are not going to school. They are not cared for. They are not giving meals. Almost all of it illegally. Are you aware of that? That's a yes or no.
Yes.
Do the Know Your Rights presentation help them in those situations?
Senator ORR.
That's a yes or no, I think. Do you really think that you're helping these children by releasing them to labor traffickers and, yes, sex traffickers? 85,000 children whom you have no contact with, and your answer is we gave them a presentation before we turned them over to these people who are exploiting them on a scale not seen in this country for 100 years, a century. A century. It's a disgrace in the United States of America. Let me ask you this. You did an audit, I noticed, where you gave yourself a clean bill of health. So just tell me this. Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Senator, we have a thorough vetting process.
Do you require sponsors to document their relationship with the child?
Yes, we go through.
No, you do
process.
not. You do not. Have you read the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations reports on your office? There was one in 2016. There was one in 2018. There was one in 2020. There was one in 2022. Spanning administrations, what they found is you do not require sponsors to document their relationship with the child. You release them anyway. What about background checks? Do you require background checks on all adults in the household?
In cases where the child is being released to their parents, we do not require background checks. But Senator, I would
Do you
really
require
like
background checks on all adults in the household in any case?
Yes, in some cases we do.
What percentage of cases do you do background checks on the adults in the household?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Do you do home visits in all cases? You can actually see where these children are being released, whose care you're putting them in?
We do not do home visits in all cases. Senator, I'd really like the opportunity to talk about what we are doing.
I know what you're doing, and it's incredibly and totally inadequate. And we can read about it in the New York Times. Since you say you've read it, let's talk a little bit about that New York Times report if we could. Here's a quote from the April 17th installment. Again and again, veteran government staffers and outside contractors told HHS, including reports that reached the secretary, that children appeared to be at risk. Did you warn the secretary that children were at risk?
Senator, I'm in regular contact with the secretary.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
Safety and well-being of children is our top priority.
Did you warn him that children were at risk?
I'm not going to get into the conversations I've had.
You're
with the
here and you're under
secretary.
oath, and this is an oversight hearing, and we need to know what you're doing because you're manifestly not doing your job. Did you warn him that children were at risk? Do you believe that children are at risk? Let's start with that.
Yes.
Okay, did you warn the secretary?
Senator, I'm not going to get into the specifics of my conversation, but I would like the opportunity
Why
to
wouldn't
talk
you
about-
warn the secretary that children were at
I
risk?
would like the opportunity to talk about what we
Let's
are
look at what the
doing.
secretary said to you. The other one, James. Yeah, that one. At least 5 HHS staff members said they were pushed out after raising concerns about child safety. Mr. Becerra, the secretary, told the ORR director, that's you, right, that if she could not increase the number of discharges, he would find someone who could. And then he went on to say that if Henry Ford had run his plants like this, he would never have become famous and rich. This is not the way you do an assembly line. Get the kids out, run them through, get them out to those sponsors, those traffickers. Why didn't you resign when he said this? Do you think that this is morally acceptable?
Senator, I joined ORR in September of 2022. I believe that was reported prior to my arrival, but I cannot speak
This is from
to-
an article this year.
I can't speak to what the secretary.
Do you think that this
Ma'am,
is
sir.
acceptable to run ORR like an assembly line and to release these children
I
to
can assure you, we
traffickers?
do not run ORR like an assembly line. The safety and well-being of children is our top concern, and by
Plainly
statute-
not. Plainly, it is not your top concern because you have managed to lose 85,000 of them. And the Times knows where they are, or 2/3 of them, and they're with labor traffickers. It's unbelievable. Let me just ask you this. How many kids right now, the 430,000 approximately, unaccompanied children have crossed the border under this administration? It's an astounding number. How many are you in regular contact with right now?
Senator, we have a number of different providers across the country who
But what's the
provide
number? What's the number? How many of you are you in? You said child welfare is your top concern. What's the number?
I don't have the specific numbers.
How can you not know? Why
Because-
would you come to this hearing and not know?
Respectfully, if you would like us to provide comprehensive case management to children after they're released from our care, so we can report.
Respectfully,
exact-
I would like you to do your job and not release children to human traffickers. Respectfully, that's what I would like. I'd like you not facilitate the largest child trafficking ring in American history. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wow.
So that was it. You heard it right from the person that's responsible for placing these children. It's wild.
Yeah.
And, right?
Yeah,
Mind blowing.
430,000 children unaccounted for.
Wow.
Dennis, let me just, because there's some reaction. Let me speak. Let me read some of the reaction that we got from this. Brittany says, "Wait, what effing year is it? Turning kids over to labor traffickers. Thought it was 2023." Katie tells us, if the United States of America can't even act in the best interests of our own American citizen children, what hope is there for children who are brought to our country illegally and subjected to various types of traffickers? Brittany says, you can tell by her posture that she simply does not care. Cindy says it's insane. Scott says she probably went and gave herself a raise. Jerry, I have seen that video before. It's absolutely sickening.
It
Yeah.
is. It is absolutely sickening, but nothing is being done about it, and we sympathize with those people. And so, how does that affect us, right?
Right.
We know, it's a terrible thing. We never want to see human trafficking. We never want to see child trafficking. We don't want to see these kids being released to sexual predators or labor camps or anything like that. But the ones that are being placed, so there's a federal law out there. It requires the school to immediately enroll any student under federal law and bypass the typical waiting period for documentation, like a typical enrollment for these kids that are coming over here. So these kids are being placed in our public schools.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even know English. And I encourage everybody in your audience, go to your child's school website in the staff directory and type in English, and take note now of how many teachers are out there and their official title is English as a secondary language. It's mind-blowing. This is happening everywhere because they don't know what to do with these kids. They don't even speak English, and they're putting them in 4th grade, 5th grade, what have you, and they're expected to keep up. So what's happening now is it's all in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're hearing a major push now in our school systems for what they call equitable education, right? Which is actually race-based grading, where people of different ethnicities or origins or backgrounds are going to be graded differently than the rest of the class. When you have a student in your class and they don't speak any English, okay, and they're learning English as a secondary language, not a primary language, but as a secondary language, I want to throw that out there. What happens is they're forced to, for lack of a better term, dumb down their curriculum for the rest of the class. Okay, those students, the English-speaking students there, aren't gaining all of the material and coursework that they normally would, because you have a whole part of your class now that doesn't even understand the basics, right? So they're calling it equitable education. And really, it's so racist is what it is. So you're marginalizing another group of people, and you're dumbing down the education system for everybody else so that you can accommodate to this influx of asylum seekers. And so by that very logic, you could argue that the segregated drinking fountains way back when were actually equitable hydration.
Right.
By that same kind of logic, that's what you could argue, that you're giving the black and brown people a equitable source of water compared to whites. That's, you're separating the two into two different class systems, further marginalizing them. And they do it all in the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what it does is it splinters and fractures society even more.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, everybody out there, no matter what county, no matter what city you're in, because I know the city I'm sitting in, and I could name the school where I know they bring the children that are like you're talking about, that they're not speaking English, and they know what schools to bring them to. They have it set up perfectly because the schools they're at, no one's going to say anything because their jobs wouldn't allow them to.
Right.
So I'm still stunned. I never saw that video. That 430,000 children unaccounted for. My God, what's happening to them is just don't even want. You know what I mean? You can't even imagine.
Yeah, so you can't even
And
use
that's just what's reported.
Yeah.
That's what's reported. And our friends on the other side of the aisle,
Yeah.
that are progressive liberals, you cannot say that they are coming here for a better life. That is no way to live. We are turning them into slaves, is what it is. They may come here with the intention of a better life, but what they're getting is not a better life. And as a matter of fact, it's affecting our quality of life as well, because we have to provide all of these accommodations. Somebody has to pay for them. It's coming from somewhere. A report actually just came out last Friday. And this will blow your mind. There is testimony on Capitol Hill last Friday. Illegals are getting free healthcare services by the VA. They're actually going to brick and mortar VA hospitals. And what's happening is the healthcare and the dental and healthcare is being performed by the Veteran Affairs Division or Department. And they're getting treated at these VA hospitals. And the VA submits the claim to the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, and ICE is supposed to reimburse the VA on those expenses. What's actually happening is the VA is processing and paying medical claims for these undocumented migrants to get medical and dental care, and we're serving migrants instead of veterans. We have over 261,000 medical claims processed for migrants so far. And so you have these providers that work with the VA, and they're not getting paid for the work that they're doing for actual veterans. The veterans are getting the bills in the mail. The claims are being submitted and paid for the illegals before the veterans. And now you have providers that are leaving the health circle, the in-network circle of providers, because they're not getting paid, thus leaving our heroes, right? The people that have sacrificed so much and continue to sacrifice for freedom, they're put on the back burner. They're not getting the essential medical and dental care that they need because foreign nationalists are coming first.
Yeah. The more you continue, the more, it's just shocking. It really is. And I know you're going to wake people up because, hell, I'm pretty much, I pay attention, but I never saw that with Holly. I never saw that. That is an incredible video. That 6 minutes is something a lot of people should see, because she sat there and he's right. How did you come there with no answers? How did you just stand there? You just were told that you're responsible for 430,000 children missing.
Yeah.
And there was no reply. Robin, go ahead. You got it.
And Dennis, is it happening right here in Western New York? I think I know the answer to that, but is it happening here right in our faces?
It is. And I'm saying that from personal experience. Sorry, my dog is
that's all right. I can't
fired up about immigration. So it is happening here. So that's why I encourage people to check their schools, check the staff directory, because in the staff directory, you can tell very easily if these these children, these migrant children that are coming over here, are getting placed in your school, because they will actually have a specific instructor whose official job title is English as a secondary language.
Yeah.
It's a lot of it is New York City, because New York City has spent more than $2 billion on the influx of asylum seekers. They're spending roughly $9.8 million a day on supporting these asylum seekers.
Why? Why? I guess this is going to be a really elementary type question after all this. Why? Why are we continuing? Like, why is it okay? Why is it now? Jerry says it's, he says all of this brought to us by Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. I mean, why? Is it really just for votes? Why is this happening?
So here's what it is, guys, and get your number 2 pencil out because it's important, right? You look at all of the things that we showed you, from the welded open border gates, right, to the cell phones, the water jugs being left behind, the GPS coordinates, getting the cell phone, the money, everything, right? And now that we're at an election, they want to make this out to be like it's a big deal when it has been all along. It's all a political stunt. This is all intended. This didn't just happen overnight. And what this is I want to inform your audience of this. I welcome you. Go out there, do your homework, read about this. We are living in something called the Cloward and Piven strategy. That's exactly what this is. Okay, this is all planned. There was a playbook written about this right around 1965. Okay, and I've compiled a whole bunch of research papers on Cloward and Piven, and I put together, just something that I'm going to read off for you, for your viewers, to help put this into perspective for you. So it's called the Cloward and Piven strategy. It was proposed in 1966, named after Columbia University sociologist Richard Andrew Cloward and Francis Fox Piven. The Cloward and Piven strategy seeks to destroy capitalism by overloading the government with a flood of impossible demands, thus pushing society into a crisis and economic collapse. It was inspired by the August 1965 riots in a black district of Watts, Los Angeles, which erupted after police used batons to subdue an African-American man suspected of drunk driving. Many publications by Cloward and Piven were created shortly after. The authors of the Cloward and Piven strategy noted that the number of Americans subsisting on welfare, about 8 million at the time, probably represented less than half the number who were technically eligible for full benefits. So what did Cloward and Piven suggest? They proposed a massive drive to recruit the poor onto welfare rolls. Cloward and Piven calculated that by persuading even a fraction of the potential welfare recipients to demand their entitlement, it would bankrupt the system. The result, they predicted, would be a profound, and this is a quote from the paper, quote, a profound financial and political crisis that would unleash powerful forces for major economic reform at the national level. Their article called for, quote, cadres of aggressive organizers to use, and I quote, demonstrations to create a climate of militancy. Intimidated by threats of black violence, politicians would appeal to the federal government for help. They carefully orchestrated media campaigns carried out by friendly left-wing journalists who would float the idea of a federal program for income redistribution in the form of guaranteed income for all, working and non-working people all alike. Crazy. Now, to go further, what they did to push this welfare reform to overwhelm the system, Cloward and Piven recruited a militant black organizer named George Wiley to lead the new movement. In the summer of 1967, Wiley founded the National Welfare Rights Organization, the NWRO. His tactics closely followed the recommendations set out by Cloward and Piven's article. His followers invaded welfare offices across the United States, often violently bullying social workers and loudly demanding every penny that they were entitled to. By 1969, our NWRO claimed due memberships of 22,000 families and 523 chapters across the nation. The result of this exercise from this gentleman, George Wiley, the result was one welfare recipient for every 2 working families. Despite a flush economy in 1975, okay, less than 10 years later, it bankrupted New York City. Bankrupted them. And like, that doesn't sound familiar. It doesn't sound like anything that we experienced in the past, just recently, maybe, I don't know, in 2020, 2021. To push it further, here's what they did. In 1982, partisans of the Cloward and Piven strategy funded a voting rights movement, which purportedly took up the unfinished work of the Voting Rights Act in 1965, like ACORN, which is the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. The organization spearheaded this campaign for voting rights. It was led by George Wiley's Welfare Rights Crusade and several other NGOs. They lobbied energetically for something called the Motor Voter Law, which Bill Clinton ultimately signed in 1993. This is largely responsible for swamping the voter rolls with dead wood or invalid registrations signed in the name of deceased, ineligible, or non-existent people, thus opening the doors to unprecedented levels of voter fraud or voter disenfranchisement, like we've never heard that term before. Claims that followed subsequent elections. The New Voting Rights Coalition combined mass voter registration drives, mail-in voting ballots, drop-off locations, right, that were typically featured high levels of fraud. They used intimidation on election officials in the form of frivolous lawsuits, unfounded charges of racism, disenfranchisement, direct action in the form of street protests, violent or otherwise. Just as they swamped America's welfare offices in 1960s, the Cloward and Piven set their tactics. Their tactics set the stage in Florida and caused the Florida recount crisis of 2000. Okay, it introduced a level of fear in the U.S. election systems that we had never seen before. And all of this was funded by George Soros' Open Society Foundation and their shadow partners in NGOs. So you look at this, it's all planned chaos, right? Because chaos is instability, and instability is an opportunity to get people to accept things or do things that they normally wouldn't have otherwise done. And that's what it is. It's to get these people in here. This is the end game, folks. This is where we're going to end this podcast. You want to know why our borders are open, why we're allowing all this to happen, and why we're sympathizing with these people when our veterans are suffering, when the American families are suffering. The U.S. dollars were 20% less now. The average median household has $24,500 to retire on between the ages of 55 to 59. Okay, if you want to know why we're doing this and why we're allowing it to happen, it's to flood the system, overwhelm bureaucratic controls and processes that we have in place so that we break the system, we overwhelm it, and we replace it with a different one. And that different one is socialism. We already see it now with social Marxism on the rise. But from an economic perspective, the end game is socialism, okay, where we get all these people on benefits and we have to completely overhaul the system and create a new, and that's the end to American capitalism as we know it, okay? The end game, though, how does this work? Like, what? It's all about votes. The end game in this, folks, is to turn all of these illegals that are here into registered voters, so that they can continue to vote for these democratic policies that got them here and that continue to destroy our country, so that our country ultimately ends up being these socialist shitholes that these people tried to escape from originally. And that's not hyperbole, as Joe Biden would say. That's a fact, because as of June 2023, the District of Columbia and municipalities of 3 states allow non-citizens to vote in all local elections: California, Maryland, and Vermont. That's the end game, folks. Get them all over here. Give them everything that they could ever possibly need while we suffer, American citizens suffer, the taxpayer suffers, so that they can get votes. And they're going to start off small in local municipal elections, and then they're going to eventually move to national elections. It's despicable what's going on here. But that is the end game in all this. That's the end game.
Well, you know, I was thinking about it when you were talking, and you think about what we went through with COVID, and we went through where people were so dependent We needed that check to come. Remember the unemployment, that whole thing. I mean, we were really dependent on anything the government could do for us. Americans, I mean, we needed it, whether it be rent or whatever it was. We became very dependent. There's always these markers, and you went through all of them, starting in 1969 all the way to the recount. And then we hit 9/11. You know what I mean? And then we just keep going. Robin, go ahead.
And don't you think that all of that makes it harder for people who legitimately need the benefits and deserve the benefits? Like you mentioned, the veterans, but even just the average American family who might struggle or need help with health care or something like that. It makes it harder for them to receive the benefits when all these people are frauding the system, right?
Absolutely. It's overwhelming the system. We cannot keep up with it. Look, the Fed came out and they announced that they expected our interest payments on loans to be about $500 billion. It's $1 trillion because of poor policy like this. And to your point, so imagine having a credit card and your payment on it per year is $1 trillion. We are past the tipping point. We are paying so much just in interest because of the spending from these social programs and poor public policy, COVID being one of them. What did the policies do in COVID? It shuttered small business. It drove all the business to the big box stores that already had way more money. And now we're not even going to feel the true full effects from this invasion at our southern border for years down the road, because it's a trickle cascading effect. We are just now starting to see some of the consequences from the poor public policies that were put in place during the COVID era. For example, commercial real estate is a dumpster fire right now. There is going to be a huge real estate correction, more so in the commercial real estate, because all of these offices they're empty. They put the small mom and pop shops out of business in these brick and mortar storefronts. It's empty, and the people aren't getting income. The businesses haven't come back. They didn't come back after COVID. They were completely wiped off the map. And we're just now starting to see the financial effects, especially in the real estate market, of those poor policies that were put in place during the COVID era.
Yeah. So, man, that's a lot. It's nuts. Or I'm still, you know what? It still boggles my mind, and I know we gotta go. 430,000 children are unaccounted for and that's just what we know. That's sick. It's just sick, man.
You're right, Jerry.
Yeah, what's Jerry got here?
Trump promises
the largest deportation of these illegal aliens in American history. Cindy says, I have a friend that knows a senior citizen applied for food assistance, and all they will offer her is $20 a month. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You should have her walk across the border and then come back as an asylum seeker. She'll get $5,000 right off the bat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's despicable how we're treating our own here. And like I said, there are legal paths to citizenship in place. I am not against people coming to this country. What I am against is a nation without borders, because that's when we lose our sovereignty. Knock down the walls in your house and see how many animals come in. That's exactly where we're at here.
Yeah. You know what, Dennis? Why don't we leave it right there? This has been an incredible first episode.
Amazing, Dennis.
Yeah, excellent. We're going to be back, right? Every Wednesday. Dennis, you're going to come back and bring us something every Wednesday.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I encourage your audience, if you have any topics that you'd really like to hear about. I know I have a list of what I think I'd like to hear, but this is about everybody and because it affects everybody. So feel free to shoot over some topics. Maybe we'll even take a vote. If it's something that I don't know about, that's fine. I'm a high school dropout, and I've succeeded in 3 different facets of engineering. Whatever you throw at me, I'll learn. And I'll learn it, and we'll go over the facts. And I just want to say for your audience, I do take notes. I am willing to cite every single source for every single statistic that I've presented on this show. And if anybody, has anything else that they want to challenge, I welcome it. I always have all my sources listed. So that's the way I'm going to do it. And if anybody would like these sources, feel free to reach out. But I appreciate everybody's time and of course, everybody at Citizens United, for letting us use this platform.
Oh, of course. This is it now.
Oh, yeah,
Wednesday nights
please.
are yours, Dennis. It's whatever we're gonna call this, the Hannon Cannon, whatever we do, it's yours. Doesn't have to be named anything. I don't care, because this is what we need. And I want people out there too. If you disagree, feel free. Don't be afraid. No one's jumping you here. I'll bring you right on if you want to talk to Dennis. It would be great. So
Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So
yeah, don't feel like that you'd be alienated in any way. We would love to have you.
No, there's always two sides to every issue. So
yeah,
bring it on. I think Dennis is prepared for it. And Dennis, you blew me away. Great first show.
thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Dennis. I guess I should say Merry Christmas now, because we won't be back till after the holiday.
Yeah, Merry Christmas. Lock your doors.
And on that, we'll see you next week.